Hi, it's Carol Salter here, reading from her novel Witch on the Warpath. Today we're reading chapter 5. If you have a copy, feel free to read along. Gristle. The Heath Witch, who lived in Kenwood, was running errands on the far side of the city when the magpie's news arrived. She didn't return home till long after dusk, missing the afternoon edition of avian gossip. Gristle didn't look like a traditional witch, the sort children read about in fairy tales. She didn't have a pointy hat, a crooked nose, big throbbing wart, not a broomstick. She hadn't baked children alive in hot ovens, though she might if someone suggested it. No, Gristle didn't look like a witch at all, but witch she was nevertheless, and as miserable and nasty person as you could ever wish to meet. This particular witch was a whole lot worse than the nasty ones in children's stories. At least they were nice at the beginning. Anyway, Gristle was horrible from the beginning to the end, from head to toe. She had no friends, for no one anywhere liked her, not even her parents. They would have told you so too, if they'd still been able to talk. Gristle had transformed them into animals with a spell long ago. Gristle was very, very old, so fairy folk made allowances for her behaviour, saying it was natural for her to grumble and groan, just as some humans get cranky as they get older, carping on about a million insignificant things as if they have an absolute right to have a say about everything just because they've been living umpteen years. And Gristle had too. No one visited her either. Nobody wants to visit elderly women unless they really have to, for often they smell of mothballs, medicated liniment and, on occasion, urine. Folk guessed Gristle was ancient, but no one knew for sure. No one dare ask her. They didn't want to be turned into frogs. In fact, a frog would be a treat compared to the awful things most people were turned into when Gristle was having a bad day. She liked to experiment. Not content with a common green frog, Gristle would add a ginger cat's tail or a horse's black mane for fun. She might even add an extra leg if she were really hungry. You've heard about animals in the news born with an extra leg or an ear on their back? Well, that was Gristle. Not scientists breaking the genetic code, as the authorities would have you believe. What other excuse could they give? At first glance, Gristle could have been mistaken for an eccentric old lady, like the one who goes to bingo every week. There she sits in the corner, shaking a bag of resucked mint imperials. She never wins, but never complains either, and wanders home alone. No one minds her coming because she never wins. Everybody thinks, poor old dear, she only has her bingo to keep her going. No, Gristle did not look like a witch at all. She looked like the old woman at bingo. But appearances can be deceiving. Gristle wasn't her birth name either. It was her witch's name. Gristle was adamant you couldn't be a proper witch with the name her silly parents gave her, Mandy. Even after all these years, she's still obsessed about it. Drawing nearer to home, settled back into the gloomiest part of the wood, Gristle could be heard whittering on about her misfortunes, her voice carrying long and low through the dark. It just doesn't scan, she mumbled to herself. Mandy the witch, yuck. Mandy is a hairdresser married to Bernard, or a shop assistant in Bluewater. She most definitely is not a witch. I've hated that name from the day my harebrained parents chose it. I've had to listen to that hideous story over and over until I thought I'd vomit. Bah! The story Gristle bemoans is the one where her doting parents are taking the air, and her mother notices a comic fluttering along the pavement. Wondering what it is, for comics are not common amongst fairy folk, her mother stoops to pick it up. "Mandy," she exclaimed, reading the cover. "What a lovely name for a baby." She turned to her warlock husband, Sidney Stryker, for confirmation, when a gasp and a wheeze forced her to sit down on the curb. Until this moment, Mandy's, make that Gristle's, mother hadn't been aware she was pregnant with child, or rather with witch. "It's fate, kismet, isn't it, darling?" Cynthia infused, looking up at her husband, who was chanting spells to ease her sudden pain. This was because Gristle, growing inside her mother at the tender age of 12 weeks, had kicked her hard enough to give her mummy a very bad bellyache. Gristle was horrid even before she was born. A very bad sign. "Thank the four winds my wretched mother hadn't seen the Beano or Dandy comics in the gutter that day," continued Gristle. "Imagine Beano the Witch or Dandy the Witch, yuckety, yuckety, yuck!" Gristle shuddered, tensing her shoulders and shivering at the thought. "Growing up with the name Mandy Stryker was okay, I suppose. Not too much teasing except for Bandy Mandy," Gristle growled, remembering the nickname due to her wafer-thin legs. Sometimes other children called her After 8 too. "It doesn't matter," she cackled. "Those people aren't around to call anyone names any more. Not in human form," she chuckled again. "Besides, the witches at Hampstead Heath Coven agree with me, especially if they want to keep their arms and legs attached to their bodies, they do." Gristle giggled at the thought. "Mandy is a very unwitch-like name. Gristle suits me much better." The coven wisely concurred, but under their breath some muttered, "Gristle by name and Gristle by nature." Some folk might be confused with the timeline at this point. How, they ask, if Gristle is umpteen years old, did she manage to be named after a human comic from the late 1960s? Blame it on the Rift War. Before the war, fairy creatures and magical folk jumped this way and that, back and forth through the 12 dimensions. These days, that prerogative exists for a scant few species born in the in-between, like dragons, griffins, yetis, and wrens. The remaining magical species can't travel into other dimensions anymore. Witches and warlocks, however, are able to travel by time jumping within their own dimension. Time jumping is not encouraged by the Fairy Council. It is difficult and a dangerous activity, and one not to be undertaken by evil doers or amateurs. What humans in medieval times didn't know was that trying to drown a witch is nigh on impossible. Once the chosen individual is tied to the traditional ducking stool and submerged beneath the watery surface, the witch transports themselves to another time. Hence, they're either a witch and free, or not a witch and drowned. Humans lost out big time. Further information on interdimensional space mechanics and the time travel phenomena is irrelevant. It is a story for another time and place, literally. This is the case for Gristle's parents. They were witch and warlock, respectively, and were free to time jump whenever they wanted. Their favourite time and place was England in the 1960s. The original birth time zone for both of them was just after the Middle Ages, in a place well away from any witch-finding general. Regardless of this, they didn't spend much time there, just long enough to conceive, deliver and care for Mandy until she was 3 years old. At that point, her father contacted the Fingalfang Academy, a local residential witching school, and enrolled Mandy on a full-time basis. With Mandy's education arranged, her parents were off travelling around the globe down through the ages, appearing back home in time for holidays and high days. Like her parents, Gristle loved travelling. In doing so, she reaped the additional benefits of not ageing. This is accomplished by not staying in one place too long. Gristle stayed about 14 years old in appearance for decades. 14 she looked, and like 14 she was treated. Phrases like, "Shouldn't you be in bed by now, sweetheart?" and "Won't your mother be wondering where you are?" assaulted her pretty little ears. Folk underestimated her abilities at their peril. In the year 2005 AD, Gristle decided she'd had enough of the ageist comments. It was time for her to settle down and mature to a decent age. She chose North London, England to live, and during those few short years from then till now, she aged dramatically. Gristle transformed from a youthful 14 to a gnarly, wrinkly old lady looking about 90 on a good day. This did nothing to improve her atrocious temper. The reason for her super rapid aging was her personality. The personality of each witch is tuned to their ability to time jump. The more evil a witch becomes, the less she can travel, and the shorter her life becomes in human years as a consequence. The kinder the witch, the more she can travel, and the longer she lives too, barring accidents. Hence, white witches tended to live forever, and evil witches passed away in no time at all, thankfully. Gristle was now so evil she found time jumping impossible. Her wretched body was unable to take the strain and endure the bodily contortions required inside interdimensional space. Though she could do many spells and hexes, these didn't provide Gristle with all her food and creature comforts. By creating bespoke spells and potions, she supported her modest needs, managing to secure a small income with potions and spells that other witches, even bad ones, wouldn't touch with a broomstick. She'd spent most of the afternoon capturing exotic specimens, minerals and herbs for her next batch of evil spells. Weary from her exertions, Gristle didn't leave home often. She stopped off at her local pub, the George, for a refreshing draught of ale. Inside, she was fortunate to overhear a pathetic watcher called Hope confiding to a colleague about her lost charge. Hope you enjoyed that. Look forward to seeing you for chapter 6. Stay safe and well.